In this demonstration, I'm going to talk about the interface for Adobe Photoshop. So first thing you need to realize is that I'm on a Macintosh computer. For those of you who are on Windows computers, it's really not that much different. Whenever you are navigating your files, the interface is going to be basically the same, and I will try to let you know when things are going to be different. So the other thing too is, for those of you who are on Macintosh, I am currently on an operating system 10.6.8. So if you've upgraded to 10.8 or 10.7, then your interface will look basically the same, but there might be a few small differences, but nothing that's going to get in the way of the tutorials. Okay, so the first thing you need to realize is that whenever I use the lesson file from the CD or the DVD that was provided with the book, I went ahead and I placed the lesson folder on my desktop. You can do the same thing. You just copy by dragging and dropping it onto your desktop or some other location in your computer that's easy to locate. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and open Photoshop, but you might have to actually go to your applications folder to open it. And what I've done is I've handily placed it in my dock. In fact, what I've done is I've created a shortcut on my computer with a folder called CS6 that's in my dock, but you'll see that it's really easy to add it to your launch menu in Windows or to your dock in the Apple interface. So this is the default standard setup that you're going to see with Photoshop CS6. And I want to show you some different ways that you can open files. The standard simple way to open files without having to use any other kind of application would be to go up here to File in the main menu and then say Open or Open Recent, whichever would make sense. And this is, by the way, this menu at the top right here is the main Photoshop menu, and this menu is going to look very similar to the way that a lot of other Adobe application menus look. A lot of the menus are going to have File, Edit, and then there might be some different things where it says Image, Layer, Type, etc. Based on the different kinds of tools that are available in different Adobe applications. But when you get to the end where it says View, Window, and Help, those are pretty standard. We'll go into what you can do with all of those other things later, but to open something you can go through the File menu and say Open or Open Recent, just like any other type of application that you would have on your computer, and this will use your operating system to open a file. Another way that you can do it is you can go down to where it says Mini Bridge at the bottom, and if you click on Mini Bridge, it'll pop up. And yours might say connect or not connected, or if you've opened it before, it'll say reconnect like mine does. So I'm going to go ahead and click on reconnect. Yours will probably not already have the lessons folder loaded, but what you can do is you can navigate right here where it says computer, or whatever it happens to say on yours. It might have a different directory path to get started, and it'll show you your different options for your file system. If you were to need to navigate straight up from your computer, you could go to your user account. For instance, this one is, I'm called admin on my computer, and then it'll show you your desktop. This is if you're on a Macintosh computer. You might have the C drive where you have to navigate to your users folder, your username, and desktop on a Windows computer, or to documents or wherever you're keeping your stuff. So I happen to have my lesson folder in my home directory on desktop, and you see lessons, so I double click it, and then if I go to lesson 1 folder, then you can see that I've got all these different files that are in that folder, and I could choose to open one. I'm going to just open this first one. Okay, and if you want to make this sort of not completely disappear, but to minimize it, you can double click it again and it'll go back down. So I just want to show you some basic interface sections. So the first one is on the left, this right here on where it's really long and it has all these different tool icons. This is the toolbar, and if you ever wanted to show or hide it, you can go to Window, and down at the bottom where it says Tools, if you make that disappear like that, you can always bring it back by going back up to Window and selecting Tools again. You see how there's a check mark next to it. Check mark means it's currently visible on the screen. And every once in a while, if I have a lot of things on my screen and I can't seem to find something, even if it's already open, I'll go ahead and turn it off, and then I'll turn it back on so I can see it pop back up on screen. So that's a really easy, handy trick for you. And these tools are going to be all the different tools that you can use to manipulate your image. We're not going to get into each one of them now, but I just want to give you a basic overview. Also, there is a little double arrow box, and if you want to make it double sized, then you can always click that to make it long or to make it shorter and fatter. The next thing about the tools is that as you hover each tool, you can see that they change, and you'll notice that on some of them there's like a little white arrow in the bottom, and that means that there's a hidden tool. So if I click and hold, it shows me all of these other grouped and related tools. The other thing too is that you'll notice there's a yellow tooltip that will pop up, and whenever you haven't really been using the tool for a little while, this yellow tool will pop up if you hover over it for long enough, and then just to the right you see there's a thing that says M. Well, on all of these different things, they're going to have key shortcut. So if I wanted to say switch to the zoom tool, if I look at the zoom tool, you'll see that the tooltip next to it says Z. So if I were on the marquee tool and I wanted to go to the zoom tool, I could hold down Shift Z, and then now I'm on zoom tool. If I wanted to go back to the marquee with my keyboard commands, I could go Shift M. And it's really handy whenever you're using Photoshop to learn these shortcuts for all the different tools, like for instance the text tool, as you can imagine, would be the T. Okay, so now if I hold down while I'm inside of the text tool, let's say that I go back to Shift M, Shift Z, Shift T, and now I'm back to the text tool. You can see that it's really simple to go back and forth between all the tools, and it really does save a lot of time later when you're doing production work. You don't have to constantly put your hand on the mouse so that you can move the cursor around to choose your tools. So try as best you can to get used to using the shortcuts so that you can do things a lot more efficiently. Alright, now that was about the tools, but something else about the tools that's really important to understand is that each tool can be configured with its own settings. And the way that you do that is up in this options panel. The options panel is the one that naturally wants to dock at the very top up here. And you'll notice that as I change tools, that the options for each tool changes. Each tool, it's important to understand that each tool has its own separate setting configurations. So if you're trying to figure out why something disappeared up here, it's probably because you changed a tool. And if you need to get it back, you need to remember what it is that you did and with which tool, so that you'll know how to get it back and make modifications. Okay? And this is something you're going to use quite often. Now, the other thing too about the interface that's important is that on the right side we have panels. And these panels can be moved around to go to other places, but right now I'm just going to show you the basics of where the panels start off. And you'll see that you can switch panels by clicking on different ones, and we'll talk about what all these different panels are. These are all going to be panels that will allow you to adjust things, either whether on layers or channels or color or whatever. And to get panels to show up, you can go up to Window, and all of these right here are going to be panels. Alright, where some of these other things like these items down here are going to be main toolbar interfaces. Now notice right where it says application frame, by the way, that's going to be on Macintosh computers, and I'll talk about that later. But for Windows users, you're not going to have that. I'm going to go over how you can manipulate panels in a later video, but just for now, that's what the panels are. And lastly, on this video, I also want to show you where you can find your preferences, and we'll go over some different preference settings later in different tutorials, but right now, let's just show you where it is, in case you want to explore it on your own. So if you go up to, on a Mac, you go to Photoshop, Preferences, and that's going to be true of any application on a Macintosh computer. You're going to go up to the name of the application and find Preferences. Now in Windows computers, you would go up to Edit, and then down below you would have Preferences, Settings, and Preferences. Okay, so on an Apple, you go to Photoshop. On Windows, you go to Edit to find your preferences. Alright, so let's go and look at Preferences, and then I'm just going to click on, I'm just going to click on General, and you'll notice that all of those other sub options that I had are still right here. So you don't have to know exactly what you're looking for when you first go to preferences, because you can click through them, okay? And one of the first things that I will show you about the interface, especially for those of you who have ever used Photoshop before and you might be a little irked by the color, is that you can change the color theme right here. So you can change it if you like a lighter color, because maybe if you don't have the greatest eyesight, you know, some of these tools are hard to see in a dark palette. You can also go back. This used to be sort of the original color, this brighter gray. You can also make it super dark if you like that, but the standard default is to be this sort of charcoal color. You can pick your own. I'm going to, for most demonstrations, I will leave it in the default color so that it is consistent. Another thing about the preferences is something doesn't seem to be working right or working as you would expect it. Go to preferences and see if you can figure out how something got reset, or if you need to set something back to defaults. Okay. All right, so that's going to end this tutorial for now, and we're going to move on to other tutorials.